Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
I guess it might help if I actually mute the YouTube.
Hello. Hey, Ma. It was so confusing. So thank you guys for coming in. We are going to get started in just a few seconds. Tonight is a special show because Tiffany and I, a few weeks ago, went to a historic archive building right down the road from us. Literally stumbled across it. Hubby and I did way before that. And we wound up getting a lot of true artifacts and documents and newspaper clippings and stuff on the famous Forest Haven Institute. So tonight we will be sharing some light and truth on what really happened at Forest Haven. I'm sharing out.
Sharing at the Twitch.
That's what I'm doing. Beat you to it. Oh, I hit you by an accident. I'm sorry. So, and come in, share out. Hey, Chris. So, as we get everybody shared out, we will start. Hubby will start his intro, and then we will go from there.
Small little intro that I wrote up for her. I just doesn't understand my handwriting, so I'm going to read it. The year is 1925. Just outside of Laurel, Maryland, is a 300-acre lot surrounded by a large forest area, hence the reason it got its name of Forest Haven. It was supposed to be a haven for people to go and learn life skills outside of the city area. And we'll get more into that as we go along. As the title says, it's the rise and fall of Forest Haven. Forest Haven was an institution for the mentally ill, mostly from the DC area, not from Baltimore and the surrounding areas, but mostly from DC. It was owned by the Washington, D.C. government, and it was a place for developmentally challenged individuals to be sent there when all else failed. A lot of the research that we found out and stuff like that, as people were going along and developmentally ill, all you had to do was bring somebody in front of a judge, and essentially they could send them to Forest Haven. And the unfortunate problem is, once they were sent to Forest Haven, a lot of the times they were never seen again. It was kind of an out of sight, out of mind place. And as we go through a lot of the research that we found and stuff like that, you'll understand the out of sight, out of mind aspect.
It's super sad. I cried even doing this report because of what the children and older have went through, and you'll understand as we go through it.
Forest Haven was open from 1925 and shut down in October of 1991. So like 66 years or so. During the time that Forest Haven was open, it had many problems. that are still resonating to this day. A lot of when we went and personally looked at Forest Haven, it is an extremely abandoned place.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the places you don't even walk into because of the fact that floors are falling apart. I mean, if anything, some people they should have tore this place down many years ago. But the unfortunate problem is they're not going to. I mean, there's 20.
It originally was over 30 buildings, but now standing, I think, is about 20, 22 maybe.
So, and a lot of them, I mean, when you go in, I mean, we have the video on there that you
I have it in our clips underneath.
You'll see that a lot of the buildings, I mean, it's obviously no electricity, so anything that's in there is resonating from any of the spirits that may still inhabit it. And the fortunate problem is there's a lot. I mean, you had infants that were brought there that were developmentally. You had we watched a video last night of a gentleman who was blind, 10 years old, and was there until he was in his 30s. And the only reason he got out of there is because a lot of the stuff that was going on, he actually went to television station and brought it up. There's a case that is still active to this day of a 17-year-old girl that died there, and how bad of the malnutrition and the stuff that was going on in there. So, hey Sherry.
Hey sis.
So as you come in, if we don't acknowledge you right away, we will acknowledge you because there's a lot of stuff to go over.
It's going to be more than an hour to get your coffee, tea, and your crumpets or cookies or whatever. Make yourself comfortable.
So.
This took me 4 hours with Tiffany and over 130 pages. And no lie, because I sent them all to him. I said, help me read them. He's like, oh my God. So I wasn't going to read all 130. That would just take forever. But yeah.
What, tea and crumpets? And Sherry, that was her responding to you this morning, not me. I was at work.
But, you know.
I looked at him like, what?
But it still looked cool. I like your resin work. So if you're done your intro, let's switch so I can, unless you want to continue reading. So there's a lot. Give me that folder. Couple moments, people. Read. If not, just move and I'll do it.
This came from the archives. DC Village was opened in 1906. Originally known as the home of the aged and the infirm at Blue Plains. The nursing home included a 5-story infirmary, a center building, auditorium, chapel, and sprawling complex of cottages, which, when you look at it, there's like a total of 23 buildings and stuff like that. In addition to the elderly, the center also accepted and treated mental patients refused by Forest Haven and St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Throughout nearly the entire lifetime of the facility, it was plagued with reports of poor living conditions, abuse, neglect, malnutrition, and much more. In 1995, the Justice Department findings of 37 preventable deaths at the Institute. It was closed down only to reopen as a homeless shelter. More from the archives. It was a children's developmental center and mental institution. It was sometimes referred to inaccurately as the Fuller State House and Hospital and Patuxent Mental Hospital, although this was not an official moniker. It was notorious for its poor conditions and abuse of patients. It opened its doors in 1925, shut down in 1991 by a federal court. There have since been numerous civil and class action lawsuits involving patients and employees. So we watched a couple of actually interesting YouTubes last night that went over some of that, which was some of the cases included sexual molestation of boys and girls, because they brought both. Girls were off in one section, boys were off in another section. But sexual molestation of minors, essentially. Very, very poor malnutrition, to the point where when they did feed them, some of the deaths that occurred were due to, it's called aspiration pneumonia. Essentially what that is if somebody feeds you something, whether it be pudding, jello, or water, and it doesn't go down the proper tubes that it's supposed to, and it ends up going into your lungs. Well, when they did the autopsies, they found food in people's lungs, and that's some of the reason that some of them passed away. In the beginning, it was considered a state-of-the-art facility. Was it Eleanor Roosevelt?
Mm-hmm.
Eleanor Roosevelt was actually there at the grand opening of the facility for the place. It had a good reputation as a hospital with the standards of any other state, basically to follow. Once the decades started getting along, and essentially they were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. Some of it was hiring non-licensed doctors to be in there. Unlicensed doctors that like they had a dentistry in there, and doctors were doing dentistry work. Well, unless you're a dentist, you're not licensed to be doing dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the decline was from stuff that was going on within. I won't get too graphic, but when you don't have food to eat, you're going to find something else to eat. And that was in one of the...
I copied that link. If you want to paste that into the comments, they can go and watch that interview. It gives more in depth later on.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
That's our link right there.
Oh, that? Oh, then you screwed that up. Okay.
Give me 1 second. No, for it. That's okay, Jackie. We appreciate you coming in and popping in and saying hello.
Hey, Jackie. Oh, is it? Yep, that's it.
Thank you.
That part is you gotta open it in order to do it.
1 second, people. So, this young lady did her name is Nori Tagori. She looks like, she's got the sarab hat, hair covering thing on. I'm assuming she might possibly be Muslim, not exactly sure. But this was done in 2015, I believe it was.
Yeah.
It goes over the young black gentleman that was the blind gentleman that was there. So if you want to check it out, here's the link. I will make sure we put it in the YouTube link later on so that she gets credit for that video that we shared. But by 1991, the place was so bad off that that's the federal courts just said no more, and ended up closing Forest Haven.
All these are reports, so if you want to read them, have fun with it.
Another thing that we found out is that a lot of they had a small morgue there, and in order to keep the people that were there, to make sure that Forest Haven was kind of making money, they started burying them in unmarked graves and such like that on the premises, to the point where still to this day some remains are still being found. It's been decades and stuff like that some parents may not be around anymore to identify or be able to use DNA testing on these individuals to match them. I mean, like, say something happened to Rose, but my DNA testing and Linda's DNA testing would be able to identify Rose. So, but when you put somebody in there in the 1950s and 60s, parents were probably already in their early 30s and 40s by then, to try to figure out who somebody is now, 2022, that was buried in 1950s and let's say 70s and 80s. Most of those parents are deceased, and it wasn't like they were cremating them and taking them out and sprinkling their ashes. I mean, they were legitimately burying people on the land itself. We had some good experiences, EVP and such like that, when we went. I mean, anybody that goes there, now it's heavily somewhat guarded. I mean, they have security that drives through there, and you kind of have to go in dead of night so that way you're not seen. But even if you try to go in there during the daytime, make sure you take extra batteries.
Yeah.
And for every piece of equipment that you might have, whether it be your camera, your cell phone, uh, flashlights, you're going to want like 3, 4 different flashlights because of how big this place is. And it's going to take you more than just one day of going in there. Because, I mean, we've gone a couple times, and
There's still a lot.
each, I mean, we only went into maybe 5, 6 buildings. But it was the first time we went, that was the one where we got chased out of there. Not by security, but by actual something, another human that was messing around and stuff like that. So I'm going to hand it over to her because I'm getting droopy eyed. So I'll be in the chat.
You're not going to sit here and fall asleep behind me?
No.
Oh, he's leaving us.
I'm legit leaving you this time. Last time if everybody watched, they were watching me fall asleep in the back.
Yeah. No. Scoochie. So I did print some of the archives out. I did put some on the computer because it was just too much to print out. But there is new.
Especially when I just got fresh ink.
I'll wait until he leaves.
We only have a 1,000-page subscription. If you print anything over 1,000, we're just kind of screwed.
Sorry, gotta do my work, right, guys? So I did during the research that Tiffany and I have done. I'm telling you, it was amazing on what we could find. Thank you, Chris. This was a fun case, a sad case, and a surprising case on what we have dug up. We didn't only dig up the history of when it was built, when it was open to when it was closed, but we found out why it was closed and what happened to certain patients that were there and why they were not supposed to pass. There is history in here that will tell you that if they did not cooperate or behave properly, and mind you, these are the special mentally, patients. They call them something different, and I don't like that word, so I'm not going to call them that because to me they're not. They just had mental issues. They weren't deformed. They were just, in my case, had some screws loose. They needed to be taught in a completely different way, and that's just how I go about it. In their eyes, they were mentally retarded. I don't like using that last word. To me, it's inappropriate. It's just who I am. So if they did not behave and they did not cooperate or they did something they weren't supposed to during the day, they were put in an isolation room with a cage over the window. I mean, it was like they were in jail. They only had a bed, and that was it. And if they were lucky, they would get water. And these people that were put in here from childbirth, I mean, they were extremely young. If they had a disformity from birth, the parents wouldn't think twice. They would just give them up and hand them over, sign the papers, and walk away. Now, there was one incident where this gentleman, he's a brilliant gospel singer now. And in the link that we showed of the YouTube, we'll show you in depth of that, this lady that did the interview with this patient and his mother was absolutely stunning. I love the information she got. She spread more light on it. I didn't even honestly know that any of them were still alive, to be honest, because there were so many of them that have passed away because of the abuse, because of the neglect. Um, Same thing. I mean, they were supposed to be taught how to do everyday life things like we do now, go to work, drive, wash dishes, wash your clothes, stuff like that, within this very small community that they knew as life. That was it. So this one gentleman realized, I don't want to be here no more. He's been there since, again, from birth, and as growing up, he literally told a reporter, I have been beaten. And that was sad hearing him as a young adult in his 20s, but a young adult, um, telling this reporter that he was beaten because of something silly that he did. I mean, you got to realize when people are mentally ill, they don't always think. They can't always comprehend like we can. You know, it's just how things happen. There was times where he wouldn't get food. He wouldn't get water, milk, whatever the meal was for that day. He would just have to sit there because once he got everything, it was all taken from him. So he had nothing. Now, because he voiced his opinion to a reporter, his mother heard it. He is now doing much better. Of course, not living there, but he left there right before they closed. And he now is a gospel singer. He owns his own piano, which was the highlight of his life. You know, he loved playing. He's still around. He lives in the Maryland area somewhere. But, you know, it's just a lot of people, and this is what makes me sad, don't realize just because they have a mental illness, just because they have a deformity from birth, does not change who they are. They just have to either learn things and go about things a little differently, or they just need more help. Like a lot of these people in the Forest Haven needed the assistance, needed the one-on-one. But because Forest Haven was so short staffed, it was impossible, and I mean impossible, to give all of the patients one-on-one. So their solution was, well, let's lock them up. One less person, one less worry. And that's where the hidden graves came from, and they thought that they were taking care of the problem until the government caught wind of it. And then when the government caught wind of it, there was lawsuits coming out their rear end. And when the lawsuits came, parents were aware of it. Because obviously it's going to be all over the news after, you know, the first couple cases and stuff. You know, it's very, very sad. So I do have a report here. This is an old report. Not sure if it's going to tell me the date on here, but it's from WJLA report. For what should be one doctor of 50 patients was one doctor with 200 patients, which is very true because it's in the documents here. Sorry, guys. Officials are backtracking on the discovery of remains and will only confirm that they are searching for the facility for remains. So it, because of the unmarked graves, because of the secrets that the doctors had, the nurses had, the help, whatever help they had. I mean, it was just doctors and nurses of what little they had. Reporters went in there trying to figure out what was going on there. Because the headline of this report is Remains Found at the Abandoned Forest Haven. Now, at one point, they thought it was an animal, a rabbit, a bird, whatever. But it wasn't. It was what they speculated to be a human remain. Now, with it being a human remain, it could be, as early as fresh, or if they didn't speculate on, what it was, but it was just the fact that they had teenagers, a group of kids, go in there and found remains, and it was hung. So you can tell, from there how decayed or how fresh it was. And in this case, it was way gone, where it was hard to detect on what it was. Whether it was a patient, whether it was, fresh, and it was just hidden very well because they are still looking. Investigators found that they think may be human remains on the grounds of the infamous Forest Haven. The former DC faculty of the mentally ill adult that was shuttered after a series of lawsuits in the early 1990s. A possible human remains were discovered. It says last night, but again, you got to remember it was done years ago. So when it says last night, it was not literally last night, because I got these like 4 weeks ago, and these reports were done years ago. The abandoned facility is located in Laurel. Investigators are still trying to verify the remains are indeed human. So again, they're not sure. But they said it appears to have been there for some time, and the news channel has a photo, which I was not able to get a hold of, which I am glad I was not, because I most certainly did not want to see that. And I'm pretty sure you guys didn't either. This is already getting sad. So what appears to be a grave in the back room of the facility. Chilly news, and especially considering the disturbing history of the place. I took a bunch of photos, which is from this reporter. There a few months back before I was spotted by security and asked to leave the property promptly. You can check them out, and they give his website and all that good stuff. But again, I really didn't think we need to go see the gruesomeness of it. So it was just one of those things. Yeah, it gets sad as things go on. This place, it's a lot of history there, but after you start digging into the history of it, instead of just going in and saying, well, this is just a tuberculosis hospital, a disease took the patients, it wasn't. It was nothing like Glendale. And Glendale even has some horror history to that as well. Forest Haven Asylum, also known as the DC Training School of the Mentally Ill facility operated by the district. When it opened sometime in the 1920s, Forest Haven was known as a state-of-the-art treatment facility. The 250-acre compound was occupied by over 30 buildings, including a cottage, a kitchen, theater, gym, and a hydrotherapy building, a various of other hospitals and education buildings. As time went on, the newest worst off at Forest Haven, and it began. Oh, wait a minute. And it began a dark, wrenched place where the only way out for many was a tiny basement morgue. And when we say tiny, there's 3 slots on one side, there's 3 slots on the other side. 6 slots. That's it. So it was 6 at a time, and it was that small because that was how quick they were able to move them. So if one died or passed away or, of some reason, they were able to have a coffin ready in a truck, or what they call a trash truck, and hauled away. and put in a hidden grave is what they called it. A tiny basement morgue that was the last spot before an unmarked grave on site. It has been reported that some graves are occasionally uncovered by flooding. So this seats here, this is what the theater looks like, which is covered in grass and moss, and it's just there. That one. Now, by this time, let me see here. This is a report that was made from the District of Columbia, whom is referred the bill to amend the Act of the provide the commitment and maintain and discharge of the district training school and other purposes. And this was from 1925 was their first report. And this was in March. They opened, they said, in October. And this was approved. Hi, Aunt Kathy. Thank you for coming in. Approved March 3rd of 1925, an amendment having considered the same report favorable thereon with amendments, and recommend that the bill was amended do pass. The amendments are as follows. Strike out all of the inactive clause and interest of follow. So it's strike out the feeble mind and interest of the mentally ill. And then the board, the department, so they were trying to do a lot in a very short time. And this was $19.25. And then the purpose of the bill, hold on. Yes, Rose. No, I don't. Get your shower. The purpose of the bill, as amended, is to accomplish the following: to authorize voluntarily admission of the mental patients to the district training school, whose name has changed to Forest Haven. So it went from the district training school, no, it was DC to Forest Haven, because DC was shut down, and then it switched over names. It required that so in this part 2 was to try to get the patients, when they were their relatives are financially able to pay for all or part of their expenses involved. So it was supposed to teach the patients there how to financially take care of themselves. So this just goes into what they were supposed to do with the patients. The patients are supposed to have privileges in their own release and their discharge 5 days after failing his petition, the superintendent of the training school, unless during the period of direction of public welfare petition, the district court, and attend the patients in court for court hearings. So it was another court case that they had already off the bat. So this one was, jumping forward a little bit, Wednesday, August 5th. This is North County report, literally a report from the archives, stamped, certified. Article text: the parents of 5 former residents of the district's now closed facility. This was done in 1992, so this was a year after. Of the mentally ill said a lawsuit said in a lawsuit yesterday that incompetent medical records and behavior beyond and bonds a professional and human decent led to their children's death. The suit against the district's allegations that the 5 deaths at Forest Haven were related to aspiration pneumonia, just like what Chad said, in which the food seeps into their lungs and causes a fatal choking, vomiting, and aspiration. The staff calls this condition by feeding the residents laying down. So obviously we don't feed our infants laying down. We don't feed anybody laying down, because what's going to happen? It's going to lay in their throat. They're going to choke. And for some, and not all, but do not have the strong neck muscle to move that food down your throat, down through the organs where intestines where it needs to go, will also have that problem. So laying down relaxes all that. And a lot of these nurses and stuff did not understand, nor did they care, because either they weren't trained properly or they just weren't given the care in the world, because it wasn't anybody related to them. It was just another paycheck to these people. And that's pretty sad when it comes to somebody else's child that they put in your hands. According to the suit, and then failure to treat them, the parents assorted allegations made by the U.S. Department of Justice as it fought to close Forest Haven and protect the residents in the meantime. In 1989 and 1990, the department submitted a report of the medical experts who said the substandard medical care contributed to at least 8 deaths at the facility. A class action suit to close the Laurel facility was filed in 1979. Now, mind you, they opened up in 1925 in October. And the city agreed 2 years later to close its doors. But it was October 1991 before all 1,300 Forest Haven residents were resettled into group homes and nursing homes. And again, this says yesterday, but it was done back in August of 1989. The suit involves 5 residents who died between August of 1989 and April 1991, when only about 200 residents remained at Forest Haven. The 5 range from ages from 22 to 35. The suit also claimed that the 5 residents suffered severe emotional distress and physical discomfort. The allegations, for example, that some of the residents were kept in cribs, which were cages. In their days, cribs were not just metal rails going all the way around, but they also have them going on top. So they could not stand up. They could not roll around. They had to lay down. So whatever happened, if they messed themselves, that was it. They were kept in cribs and restrained for years, lying in their soiled diapers on filthy sheets in rooms that smelled of urine. So this is how bad it got. And this is the sad part, that a lot of these people that were still in my age, in my eyes, still young, in their 20s, early 30s, still had a life ahead of them. Still could have made something out of themselves. But because they were emotionally attacked and physically attacked and, not taken care of properly, Lauren Brown, a spokesman for the DC Department of Human Services, said the allegations that the had not seen the suit and could not comment on it. We are concerned about the welfare of all of the citizens we serve, Brown said. So this was from a lawyer, and obviously they didn't see the greater deal of it. It is our practice to provide the best possible care. In early suits involving Forest Haven, the city was denied negligence, said the residents who died there were so seriously ill it could not be saved. So they lied. They tried to save, in our cases, your own ass, which, in a lot of cases does not work. The suit filed by Steptoe and Johnson outlines each of the 5 deaths and refers the recruiting and protracting illnesses, which it says were improperly treated. It's allegations that Walter, 34, was tied to a wheelchair without footrest, which caused his feet to swell. Desperation, long-standing problems with vomiting. Paulson was fed laying down, according to the suit. He died of malnourishment and at only 66 pounds. So this gentleman was 34 years old. At that age, you would be a couple hundred pounds, if not more, and you would, even in his condition, being mentally ill, he still should have had some type of weight on him. But because of how he was treated, it didn't happen that way. The suit said that on December 6, 1986, Paulson was having difficulties breathing, and that the attending physician prescribed treatment by phone without seeing him. The alleged Thank you, sis. I had fun. I say I had fun because I was in a new place where I would have access now to actual real life archives that happen in this world instead of, trying to do something else. So that was the part that I liked. Do I like reading this because of what happened to these people? Absolutely not, because it is sad. But do I love the research? Yeah, because I could spread light on what happened. We went and researched this place, we went and investigated it, and this is, just some light on it. And, I do love what I do because I can, do a final report and lay this to rest. And I did make its own folder and all this good jazz. So, yeah, tomorrow is Sam. Always, sis, always. Tomorrow is Sam's, and we have a special guest tomorrow. Oh, yes, Sam, the Hospital of Horrors. This is the hospital that we were trying to take you to. Remember that? And we wound up getting stuck because it was so overgrown. Well, this is that report. This goes with what we were trying to take you to. So if you remember us trying to take that a little adventure right after. I get my StreamYards that I'd love to. Oh yeah, absolutely. We would love to do that. Oh, I got a skeeter. I don't know where it came from. I killed a skeeter. Yeah, it was about October. It was right after my accident. Remember, I was going to go get the kids their outfits. Lying down. According to the suit, he died of malnourishment. 1989, Tolson was having difficulties breathing, and that the attending physician prescribed treatment by phone without seeing him. That it alleged that Tolson was not examined until 22 hours later, when he was lethargic, coughing, and suffering a seizure. I see. I can't even say that right. I know what it is. Yeah. About a month later, the suit said Tolson choked on regurgitating material while confined to a room apparently unattended by Forest Haven personnel, causing his death. Besides the city, defendant's name in the suit includes the office officials at DC General Hospital, which is impaled in one death, and 6 district offices. One of the 5 counts allege that the residents' civil rights were violated, and other accounts arrest, neglect, and emotional distress. The suit seeks a total of $10 million in damage for pain and suffering and emotional distress, and $10 million in punctured damage. The to collect damage from the lawyers must provide extraordinary criticism, a past resident of the DC Trial Lawyer Association, said he is not aware of any recent case in which damages were upheld against the district. So again, these were all filed, but again, in between all that, another death. And it was sad because it could have been taken care of only if the doctor cared. And that was one thing that they realized throughout the years, that the doctors began not to care. Why? Because they were only worried about, why? Zach Green. And that was the sad part, because there's so much more that they could have learned. Like the gentleman that, Mr. Crawford, that wound up getting out of there, he survived. He was able to live his life, and still to this day, he does musical tours. He's a gospel singer, and it's not just him. It's so many more that could have lived in their life, and I believe that there is a few that actually have, whether they're blind, whether they're deaf, whether they're, without a foot, whatever the case may be, or just mentally ill. Either way, I still believe that they could have had a life. So in 1990, district and federal taxpayers have unwritten financial financed a system marked a multi-pal. Hold on. Washington Post, which includes visits to both homes and programs where the specials spend their days. Yes, I switched that word, and that's just how it goes. Examinations of tens of thousands of records and interviews with special men and women found more than 350 incidents of abuse, neglect, molestation, or stealing of the documents in group homes and day programs in the 90s. According to the records of 4 district agents in federal and district courts, those serious incidents involve companies that collectively run 70% of the city group homes. Yet, in that time, the district government lived not a single fine against the facility operator for maltreating the special. So again, all of this just talks about how they were mistreated and how they definitely could have gone about it a different way. They were definitely abused. Some of the women that were vulnerable and their young age were raped. Some of them actually had kids of their own because of that, and they were taken away from them, and they never seen them. So that definitely scarred them for life. And then there was some females that tried, with the males, but it's just how that goes. It's just wrongdoing, not okay. So here's another report of the U.S. District Judge this time, John H. Pratt, held a district in contempt of court for its continuing residential. It provided proper care for patients at Forest Haven. Oh, what year was this? This was in Washington Post, January 30th, 1990. The final edition. And care for patients at Forest Haven. It's home for the mentally ill. Pratt's action came in response to a request from authorities for Forest Haven residents and for Justice Department authority, Laurie, who told the judge yesterday, again, it was done years ago, that 2 physicians are caring for the 232 patients at the Laura facility. Again, 2 doctors, 2 physicians, so only 2 of them, for 232 patients. That's a lot. How are you going to do that? One of those doctors, Young Chang Hung, was found in a professionally incompetent in 1988 by the Maryland Commission on Medical Discipline. Pratt set a hearing which put him in probational status for 3 years because he did not have his license. He was on probation for 3 years. I think something else could have happened. Pratt set a hearing in March to determine the amount of civil penalty that the district will be ordered to pay. The action marks at least the 7th time in recent years that federal and local judges have found the city in civil contempt for failing to live up to their agreement to provide a valuable variety of services. The causes involve insignificant medical records for the city prisoners. So again, they're jumping back and forth from Forest Haven to what they call prisoners. Crowded prisoners in juvenile detention centers and failure to provide welfare services for the poor and shelters for the homeless. 8 Forest Haven residents have died since May of 1989 for reasons that are unclear. All but one of those deaths occurred in a cottage at the facility, so it was on the property, known as the Ellicott Building, and all but one person in their 20s or 30s. DC officials have been under a court order for 11 years to close Forest Haven. They didn't do it. They were forced. So far, they have managed to move more than 1,000 residents to group homes and communities. Those who remain in the most severe mentally ill, said Marvin, an attorney in D.C. counselor office. The process of outplacing these residents is like walking over hot coal. Bolden told the judge, nothing instant community opposite to group homes. And these are things beyond the district's control. So with this, the officials the remaining Forest Haven residents to live in filth and squat without enough therapy or nursing to attend them, and in some cases, not enough clothing. The bottom line is that conditions are so bad at Forest Haven and have gotten so much worse that people are literally dying because of the lack of medical care. Bolden continued that no doctor has connected the 8 patients' death with the incompetent care. As in, they're trying to say that they can't blame the nurses that were on duty or the doctor that just made a phone call and prescribed what he thought was the right medication. Can't happen that way. You have to see your patient. The cause of the 8 deaths have not been made public by district officials, although John, Maryland's chief medical examiner, said yesterday, again, this was years ago, the autopsy reports of 3 of the 4 patients whose deaths were reported to the district have been completed and sent to the district officials. 4 reports. Just being completed, he added. In September, the D.C. Public Health Commission took over the responsibility of providing health care for Forest Haven residents from the D.C. Commission of Social Services. Beverly, a top official of the Health Commission, could not be reached for comment. Something happened there where they didn't want to give out any type of record. This is another doctor, also could not be reached for comment. But after yesterday's hearing, Forest Haven Super Cliff said that Hung had been cited for disciplinary action because there were some irrigation notes in his private practice, as in he would in dispensing prescriptions. If you're not a doctor, you don't have the license, you don't have the right to give out prescriptions. And that's essentially what that was. He was being caught. So, it's a lot of good information, a lot of good things that I am so happy that I was able to find, only because it gives, sorry y'all, I just saw something fly in my face, that I was able to get light on. So I do have a few up here. Go through those real quick. If you guys have any questions for me, please go ahead and ask them. I will answer the best way I can. So this was the U.S. probe DC group homes. And this goes with Forest Haven. The old dusty covered wheelchair sits now in distress and crumbling at the Forest Haven Asylum in Laurel, Maryland. What was the prime medication they used? That they didn't say. I was actually looking for that. But back in the day, they were not actually given too much of an option on medication like we have today, obviously. So it had to be something that either put them to sleep, or it had to be what I would say a numbing thing. You know what I mean? Try to quiet them so they didn't have to hear them, which I think is kind of sad. And I heard another YouTube say that they didn't find out the name of the medication, but they did find out that they were giving them unnecessary drugs. Maybe, yeah. I mean, that just may be. I'm still there. Again, it's 130 pages, so I did go through them and pull out the ones that give more of a light on the lawsuits and the clients and patients and what actually happened in depth. There is a newspaper in here about that gentleman. Oh, sorry. The gentleman I was talking about earlier that is actually doing pretty good right now. I mean, he is much, much healthier. So this is by the U.S. Probe DC Group Homes. This is also Tuesday, May 4th of 1999 is when this was written. Washington. So it's on WashingtonPost.com. Drug abuse by the stuff. Yes. Oh, absolutely. You got to think 2 doctors, maybe if they were lucky, 5 nurses, if they were lucky. That says it further in here as well. But I mean, if we were lucky, that was it. And you got to think over 1,000 patients. And like Chad said earlier in a comment, you got 1 nurse or 1 doctor per se to over 200 patients to yourself. So you, instead of having like me being a nurse, I would have maybe 5. That's the normal. Back then, they didn't have that because they were understaffed. They didn't have And no, Aunt Kathy, this is actually research that Tiffany and I did. It's not in a book. We went to an archive. We now have access to a archive historical facility that is literally less than 5 minutes down the road from us. And then we also have a couple other archive places that we can go to for more research. So everything that I am reading today is from the place that we went to right down the road from us. And it is news clippings. This is from Catherine Boo, from Washington Post staff writer in 1999. Yeah, you never know what you find until after you're there. While we were at this place, I actually found an entire, and I will say this, size of a telephone book file of Crownsville. So that will be one of the next shows that I do later on. This is just one of Forest Haven that we've already been to a couple times. And I just wanted to do a report on it because it's wrong. I started reading it. Just, no, Mom, he's not moving to Maryland. And then also, about that special other report, the UFO report, that's all I will say. I did find information about that at the archives, but I have to go to Annapolis for that. So within the next week or two, I will have an appointment for that. So I do have a lot in the works. So this is from the Washington Post. The U.S. Justice Department has began a special probe into equality of care at district government funding the facility of the mentally ill. Yeah, there's no rooms available. The inquiry by the department's Civil Rights Division was sparked by an investigator by the Washington Post published in March that found 350 documented cases of abuse and neglect, as well as filtering in the city's 150 tax-paying financial groups. We will take all allegations of abuse and neglect very seriously and certainly follow up with to determine whether allegations warrant additional federal action, said Bill, an action assistant attorney. So this was a lawyer that was actually looking into this, general for civil rights. That's what we are doing at this case. So that was the lawyer's comment to the allegations that were given by the Washington Post, that he will look into it, essentially. And that's normally what they did, is they look into it, but they put it off to the side. Sorry, guys. You see my screen right now, you'd be like, how in the world did you do this? I did. And I have it all in order, too. So if there is any other questions, let me know, and I will try to answer them as best as I can. If I have the answers, I have read a lot of this, so I may be able to answer. So this one was another report. This was also part of the Washington Post. These are just little comments and reports that they have gotten either from Forest Haven, the reports. There was no background screening, Sam. Back then, they didn't care about background screening. There was none. No drug test, no background, no nothing. Yeah, I do believe that they do have books out, but a lot of the books that are out are either the wording's changed up just a smidge. Not saying it's not true, because a lot of the stuff that's there is true, but they elaborate on some of it. So this is word for word from this. I mean, you got investigations from the FBI in here, and absolutely. Of course they were, Sam. Opioids would definitely be in the use back then. Absolutely. So that and the other one you said was probably the top two that they used, because they knew that it helped. And if they weren't able and they didn't want to take the pill, they would crush it up and put in their yogurt or whatever the case may be back then. Their mush, just to get it in them. Because back then it didn't matter how they had consumed it. It just, the point was to get it in them, to lock that door, to put them in their cell. And yes, that's what I call it. Because if you were to see, what they put them in, then, it's just one of those, you would say the same thing. It's a metal heavy iron door on a padded room with a bed. That's it. They had this thin mattress that they would sleep on, and I mean thin. So it's just sad on how they were taken care of back then. So this is another of a mentally ill person in the district care. Mr. Brown, 39, died at a hospital. He was sent to Providence intensive care unit after developing a advanced case of pneumonia at a network for a profit. So this was also done at Forest Haven. This was another case. That's the thing, Sam. I don't know if you guys know what the inside of a cell looks like, but that's pretty much what they got. I mean, they really didn't get too much. And if they did, it was one of those, you really can't. They were grateful for what they got. They were not taught how to read, write, do math, what they were supposed to do. They have a school there. They have a church there. They were supposed to have this little tiny community to teach them the life hacks of everyday life stuff. And they weren't. They were abused. They were neglected. They were simply thrown away, shipped away, or just buried. Like they were forgotten. And it's wrong. Nobody and no set of minds should be, forgotten at all. And that's mainly why we do these reports, to shed light on what has happened. To bring an awareness, essentially. If you're going to put somebody in a facility of any sort, make sure you do your homework. Because even though this did happen, like we say, back in the day, 1925 is when it happened, to 1991, it's important to do your homework. It's very important. Because while I'm in, my life at that age, middle school, almost high school, I think, what were the family's reactions of their lives, loved ones went through? That's where a lot of the lawsuits come from, because the parents for some. I don't say all because they don't mention all of them, because there is some in here that if they had a child that was deformed, or they knew had Down syndrome, or, had something wrong with them, they would automatically call a facility to say, I don't want my child, because they couldn't love them the way you would love a normal child. They didn't see it as a God's gift, to us, a blessing, per se. So a lot of the parents, most of the parents, I can't say a lot of them, but most of them didn't care, because they didn't want to be part of it. They just, the child's not perfect, I don't want it. But there's the other percentage that just wanted what was best. And going into Mr. Crawford's story, where his family just wanted him to get the best care he could, they put him in there. Same thing with this other young lady that died at the age, I think Chad said 15 or 16. She was also put in there for the education, because they were supposed to have a good education plan to help. Well, she wound up dying because of the malnourishment and, the neglect. So with those two parents, amongst the other ones, I'm pretty sure there was a lot more, but these two were the ones that stood out because they spoke out. They weren't violent. They just took action, essentially. And there was a mother says, I'm not looking to get rich. I'm just looking for justice. That's it. They don't want the money. They want justice. So they were offered thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were offered a lot, just as hush money, is how they put it. They don't want that money. They want justice for what was happened to their child. That's it. It's simple. I mean, if my child or my husband or my mother, my father, whatever, would have went through that, I would have been the same way. I don't want that money. Keep your money. It's filthy. I don't want it. Hush money. Take it. I just want what was right. I want justice. You didn't do what you said in the contract to teach them everyday life on how to maintain. I mean, that's why they had little cottages, houses, for them to be independent when they hit that point in life. And then they were supposed to move them out from their cottages into the real world. Therefore, they can be with their parents. They could be with family full time. Not all of them made it. Very, very, very few made it. So it's just sad on, what a lot of these people went through. And a lot of them should not, and I repeat, should not have went through any of this. So, I did it too much. Yeah, and there's still, of what I read, 11 cases still going on of what happened at Forest Haven. 11 cases. That's insane. So this is another one that happened in 1993. This is, title, Washington Post. I had to read it. Stephen, who is mentally ill, sat at the dining room table in the group home, written a letter into an early morning hours. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's definitely. But that's where it comes, where they had the hidden graves, the unmarked graves, all over Forest Haven. Anywhere you go, because that is where they hid them. And that is why mostly why they're not knocking anything down is because I'm guessing they're still trying to find what's going on. So this is about Stephen, is 42. At 2, he was taking from his mother. This is one of the cases that I was telling you. So he was 2. He was taken from his mother and committed to Forest Haven, the district's now dysfunctioned institution, for a mental illness. So he obviously had a mental illness and he needed to be taken care of. His mother had been found to be mentally ill and committed, so she was committed to a hospital as well. But there was no reason why they couldn't have went to the same facility that she could learn. And this is one of the cases that I was saying, that they split the mother and child up. Don't you think that if the child was the same mentally ill as the mother or parent or whatever, that they would want to keep them together so they can learn? How is the mother going to learn if you don't teach her? So Stephen lived at Forest Haven for 14 and a half years. The place was built in 1927 as a remote wooded area, 25 miles outside the district. Many residents died there. Their bodies were loaded into coffins and dumped from garbage trucks into an unmarked grave, which is sad. Who wants to do this? Owie. So and this is another one. I think the Evans' daughter Joy died at Forest Haven in 1978. The medical problems that they believe were excruciating by conditions there, but her death did not debater. I don't know them. They continued their fight, and in October 1991, the district finally shut the place down. From then, the special DC residents, no matter how severe their disabilities, would live with their families or in small groups in oriented neighborhoods. Today, the district in New Hampshire, so at that point they had a partner, are the only districts that have formally networked the community care and eliminating all institutions. So at this point, they shut down more than just Forest Haven Institute, a lot more. So Stephen wanted to make sure another Forest Haven never opened, to ensure that he doesn't, though. The service required to help the mentally ill people, including the negligent people we are wandering the streets. So if they weren't able to get into Forest Haven, essentially, they were thrown out on the street. Parents didn't want them. And if they couldn't fit into Forest Haven or any other special facility institute that they could possibly help, then they were homeless. And that's what's happening a lot today. The city doesn't have much money, but a lot of people want it, Stephen said. The people who make the noise get the money. My job is to speak up for those who have no voice. Steve tried very hard, said Gloria. The house manager where Stephen lives, he can be a bit hasty, but the bottom line is that he'll do anything he can to help. So this gentleman was actually trying to help prevent any more deaths and trying to help any other issues from happening. But at the end of the day, it was sad to the fact that, you come down to this and you may not be able to do anything else. Even though you're trying your hardest, you may not be able to. And that is what Stephen's goal was, to get the word out there. If he was able to get out there and say, if you have a special needs child, you can get help, but just don't go here. Don't believe in the institute, because I went through it and this is what happened from his experience. So this is another report from October 5th, actually. This is from the Washington Post also. And this is, for the past 13 years, Forest Haven has been a symbol of the district government's inability to comply with court orders involving its most disadvantaged and powerless residents. During that same period, and for many years preceding it, Forest Haven was something much worse for the mentally ill people who lived there. What had begun in 1925 as a horrendous violation in residential treatment for the special had become a grim place of minimal care and physical abuse. Residents were unduly restrained and isolated, subject to unnecessary medication, and left to eat and sleep in their filth. You can just imagine that. It was 1978 when the federal judge ruled that Forest Haven would accept no new residents, and that its administrators must eventually shut down the facility, moving the occupants into group homes. At the time, it's moving the residents. Oh man, I lost my spot again. Residents, the occupation group home. At the time, its population stood at 1,300, 1,300 residents. That's a lot. Some of the residents or delayed involved in moving the residents can be laid at the door in the neighbor's opposite free home rule. Is it true that most of Forest Haven residents have been moved into a system for 160 group homes by the time the Dixon administration took office? But it's also true that mayor administration were left with the task of finding and creating slots for those who suffered from the most profound illness and were among the most difficult to place. It is therefore a small accomplishment that Forest Haven finally closed its doors to residents' care for the mentally ill, 13 years after federal Judge John original court order. So they were not asked, they were told, they were demanded. So this became something that was out of hand, and the judge finally heard it. And it took how many years for this to happen? I mean, to me, it's just way too many. Oh, what am I doing? There we go. So this is another one from, and a lot of these are from the Washington Post because they have access or had access at the time, and they were able to get certain things. But the Washington Post was a popular newspaper, very, very popular, more than what it is now, back then, and in some cases too popular. But nowadays it's a good thing because we're able to bring light to a lot of situations that have happened. So this is another one from 1993, and this has happened in April 15th. And this is about Miss Christina, one of the patients there. A wood and brass plaque was unveiled last week to a small Tacoma Park home that has been home for the last month to several severely ill women. In memory of Christina, we dedicate this home, the Elkton Place, which is her last name. It says, her memory will stay strong and bright in our hearts forever. A ill woman who died last year, 45, last summer, 45, spent much of her life at Forest Haven and is now the now closed institute run by the DC government, where inmates were often kept tranquilized. Oh, there you go. And confined. Wow. And locked in rooms with urine-soaked mattresses. Elkton was named in a class action suit against the facility that led a federal judge to order its closure in the late 1980s, guaranteeing that the city's ill would live in their families or in group homes. New Hampshire is the only state with a familiar no institutional policy. The director of the organization that runs the new home said the staff decided to name it after Elkton to pay tribute to her struggle and the way in which she blossomed after leaving Forest Haven. She was a perfect example of someone who really benefits from just getting out of that institution. And that was said by Andrew, a reporter. Head of District of Columbia Community Service, Inc., which operated 12 group homes in the city, including the one where Elkton lived. Elkton learned to speak after leaving Forest Haven, Andrew said. So again, this goes back to where Forest Haven was supposed to teach them, have them from grade school up on how to hold a job, how to read and write and arithmetic and, everything and anything. And this woman did not learn until after she left, months before she passed. Now, her death here, because she was not there when she died, may or may not have had anything to do with Forest Haven. But in this case, it may have, because she only lived in the group home outside of Forest Haven for only a few months. And she developed a affiliate for church hymns, and I thought that was a bird coming in here, and it's not. My cat would have had a field day. So she was another one that did church hymns and soap operas. That's how she learned a lot of her development and how to speak and how to sound things out and stuff like that. So that was great that she learned on her own. So they did a dedication ceremony. House staff members and the families of 6 residents admired the neat bedrooms with flowers, bedspreads, carpets, and furnishing, carefully hung pictures, plants and in the windows, and flowers outside. So at this point, after they left, this is where they were taught their livelihood, essentially, how to live, how to produce and keep a house maintained and kept up and clean. So this is another. Yeah, I mean, because of the conditions and stuff that they went through, they honestly didn't have a chance because they weren't taught correctly. And that's the sad part. Even when they did leave, they did try, and I do give them, the people outside of Forest Haven, of course, that took them in, did actually try, but some of them were too scared to want to trust anybody else, too scared to want to believe that they're there for anything else but abuse and neglect. I mean, that's what they were raised on. That's what they knew. So this is another one. And this is about Lewis. He was a boy. This is also from the Washington Post in 1991 in October. A boy of 12. So he was 12 years old in 1928, and he entered Forest Haven Institute, an institution opened by the district for the mentally ill. He spent the next 63 years. So he got in there when he was 12. In a red brick buildings where some of the now this is 3,200 residents over a decade lived, tranquilized, sleeping on urine-soaked mattresses in locked wards. When they died, many were loaded in caskets on the back of garbage trucks and dumped into unmarked graves. Lewis is 75 now, and Rumps Rimples, I don't know. White-haired man in a wheelchair. Forest Haven's officially closed today. He will be one of the last to leave. For Lewis, a new group home represents his first chance since before the Depression to help choose his food from the grocery store and watch fireworks on 4th of July. So this proves, after so many years of all the neglect and stuff, this little boy that grew up in Forest Haven never had the chance to go to the grocery store or, like you said, watch fireworks, do anything of the normal. He didn't have a normal childhood. He was left. And once he was, what did they say, 75, in a wheelchair, which is sad. I'm pretty sure he went in there and he was up and running around and, any other child. Then when he left, he was in a wheelchair. Well, I wonder why. Well, you're not fed right. You're not taken care of properly. It's going to happen. So, he really had a sad life like the rest of them. The district was that closing the institution in Laurel ends a 15-year court fight and struggles to win community acceptance of the ill and the campaign to abandon the social policy of the institutional that is now regretted as a failure nationwide. So they now admit that. For now on, the ill, DC residents, no matter how severe their disabilities, will live with their families or in a small group home, and that has happened from that day. I still see it all the time, and I am so happy that I see these people, and me being a nurse, I get to work with a lot of them, which is fine. It's just perfectly fine. I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy watching other people with, yes, they have families just like we do. Absolutely. Group homes in oriented neighborhoods. The district joins only one state, New Hampshire, in forming a network of community care and elimination of institutions. So New Hampshire actually partnered up with this to make sure that institutions were no longer. That if they were going to shut down Forest Haven, they were going to do it to all of them. So I'm pretty sure there's more than just Forest Haven, which it makes me want to look into more of them. So maybe. It is a terrible historic, says Shirley Wade, District of DC, chapter of the Associate of Ill Citizens. There was a skeptic that some people are so disabled that they could never live in the community. Well, I'm trying, Sam. I am trying. It has been 15 years since parents filed the class action suit to improve Forest Haven's conditions, and 13 years since the federal judge ordered the institution to close. So they're still fighting, and they're still going to go for it. So this is the one that really, I don't know, kind of gave me some joy. I'm going to share the picture as soon as I get it up here. And this is the gentleman that I was telling you guys earlier about. Him, right there. He's a blind gentleman, and he actually spoke out on what was happening in his life. And it's not only him. Every single person on here is just like him in some way or another. And it's just one of those, it's Mr. Crawford. Doing the two other posts, okay. And Kathy, I'll look at that in a minute, sweetheart. Yeah, I'll look into that in a little bit. But this gentleman right here is Mr. Crawford, and he is a gospel singer now, and he plays the piano. So this is a news clipping actually from him. You see, that's the file. So a lot of good work that I did. I will put these links that I have in our site, and later on, after I'm done setting this specific site up, I will send it out to everybody. If you get a weird link, it is me. I will let you know what it is for. I know there's a lot of hacking going on, but again, I will let you know, hey, it's me. Don't accept anything else unless I say it's me. So these are small articles, and these are short. So I'll go through a few of them. This one is titled, "My Sister Died There. They called us retarded then. I call them the ill or the special. But we have come a long way," Thornton said in an interview in his living room in Northwest Washington. Hello, how are you doing? Thank you guys for coming in. I do appreciate it. What we want people to know from this play is that it is not about the disability, but the ability. Is this play talks about going back to the past, to look back at how it was not as well done as we overcame obstacles. So they did a play, and essentially it was just voicing their opinion. Thornton, now 53, was 8 when he was sent to Forest Haven from DC Junior Village, the facility for fostering children at Forest Haven. He first met his older sister and brother, also sent there by a mother who could not care for them. The worst thing that happened was my sister died there, Thornton said. Thornton remembered a time as a child when he was playing too wild in his cottage, and the staff got upset and locked him in a closet until the next staff came on duty. So if they had a 12-hour shift, that child, and I'm not talking an adult, I'm talking about an 8-year-old child, size as Rosie, was locked in a closet. He has a scar from where the staff member hit him in the eye. Like they took me in the doctor, and the staff said I fell, but I didn't fall. He hit me with his ring. The sound of children crying still haunt him. And I'll get to that one in a minute because it's pretty interesting. Sad, but interesting. We can smile today, Thornton said, on stage, but there are a lot of pain. Some staff was not so good. It was sad, but the play show we we can overcome. So when he said the sounds of children still haunt him, when we went for our investigation, which the links are in the description below, we actually heard some crying. There was no children there. We actually heard voices of help me. And, there was a lot of lost souls there, obviously. They're going to be. This one is another article of We Should Not Be Here. Donna and Shelby was 9. Oh, Donna Shelby was 9 or 8 or 9. She can't remember which. When she was sent to Forest Haven after her foster mother got sick, Donna was 61, and Donna Thornton walked on stage. Walked on stage. She clapped her hands and began her monogram. Her life story has been documented on 60 Minutes. Nice. And in 2003, CBS movie Profound Normal, starring Chrissy Allen. She will get to that later, she said. Now that she is telling the audience about the day she arrived at Forest Haven, I didn't know where I was. It was strange. She was sent to a cottage and sleeping quarters for girls. She had nothing of her own, but she made a best friend named Barbara. Then Barbara died, Donna said. She started vomiting, and the funeral was right out there at Forest Haven. I used to go talk to her. She presses her hands together. She used to have a favorite swing on the ground. And that was another thing. When we went there, we went through where the children were kept. And if you watch in the video, we barely made it out there, and one of the swings started. It wasn't much, but it was enough just to get your attention. And there was no wind at all. I went to go. Thank you. I went to go to my favorite swing, I said, Lord, what is wrong? I said, we should not be here. My mother and father, they put us here. But you know what? I always figured she'd tell the audience which sits. It got a crease in the paper. I thought one day, and that's where I lose it. No! I'm trying. Nope. I'll have to go back and see what that part is, because that makes me wonder. So there is, and I'll show you this picture too. So this is the young ladies that were telling their story, and there's tons of other people behind them. This one is in a wheelchair, but they were brave enough to tell their story. So these young ladies, both of them, apparently overcame their, if you read it down here, that actors that have overcome legit the stage fright and more. So it's pretty nice that they actually, after the ones that did leave, got to leave and start living life as a normal adult as to what they call normal. So this is another news clipping that I got from the archives. This gnat is about to die. So this is a 20-year-old clerk from Glen Burnie wondered what in the world went on here. My nerves were really shot, like other young thrill seekers of northern Anne Arundel County have been drawn to the ruins of Forest Haven, the District of Columbia institution. The mentally ill. No. I'm not. There we go. Gotcha. Sorry. He had to go. Get on my nerves. 20 years after Judge ordered the begin of transferring the residents to group homes, Forest Haven's 21 decaying brick buildings remain as a symbol of a failed policy of the institutionalize the mentally disabled. Community residents and fire officials are demanding that the district tear down the ruins that have become a magnet for young ghost hunters and vandalism. Yeah. So they got us people that want to go in there and, do some ghost hunting and some investigation because it's a really cool place. And then you got people in there that want to come in and tear it up, destroy it, paint it, spray paint it, whatever, which is disrespectful to the history after everything that they've already went through. So if anybody that's listening to this wants to go with the spray can, don't. Because it's just like us doing it to your house. That was somebody's home. It's not right. So that was pretty much it. I do appreciate everybody coming in. If there's any questions before I hop off, please do so. Ask. I do think this was a very interesting and sad report, but I'm glad I was able to do it. I'm very happy that I was able to go and figure out what actually happened there. And then I do have a lot more going on that Tiffany and I over the summer will be going to archives, places and doing research. I did actually go and get 4 or 5 books from the library about Salem witch trial from each date that did happen, and archives that I will be able to go pick up within the next week. So they are being prepared. But if there's any topic that you would like for us to hit some light on, regardless of the topic, it does not matter. The unknown, the paranormal, the UFO, whatever it is, please let us know. We will definitely be interesting and more than willing to go and check that out. Again, we do appreciate everyone and anyone that has come in. If there's any questions, please let us know. Let me see if we still have. Okay. This link right here, I believe so, is the link from that young lady that did the interview with the young gentleman that I just showed you. I highly recommend going to give her a thumbs up. She does a lot of good interviews on different places like we do. So other than that, I am going to hop off here and I am going to get my kids ready for bed if they're not already there. And I will speak to you guys later. Have a good night. Stay safe. Love you guys.